Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here, and I'm so excited to be with Dr. G. Dr. G, you are so brilliant. I've spent like the last 48 hours of my life. I know your face. Like I close my eyes and I see your face watching all your videos on YouTube. Um, I love the way that you explain things. For
Prince Harry's cry for help. Dr. John Garrison exposes hidden pain amid Meghan's smiling facade. Behind the royal titles, lavish mansions, and Netflix deals is a man quietly crumbling inside. Prince Harry's latest public appearance has sparked deep concern.
for my audience sake, you did a great video on Prince Harry this
Thank you.
week. And here are some of the words you used within the first like 30 seconds, shockingly: contempt, stress. You talk about the smiling and chuckling and the idea of performative. When we talk about this BBC interview, can you take me back to that first few seconds of that video, and can we break that down, how you saw so many emotions within the first few seconds?
So contempt is one of the easiest emotions to see because most emotions that are authentic are both sides of the face. So when you smile, it's both sides, frown, both sides. Same for pretty much everything. So when you see the corner of the mouth go up, kind of like that, usually it's a flash. Sometimes people can hold it there. There really is no other good explanation than contempt. So immediately, as soon as the interview started, you see Harry do that. 2 seconds later, he does it again. So there must have been a lot of feelings right there. Anything we feel is going to express itself in our body in some way or another. It's just a matter of knowing how to decode it. So he's somebody who was not very stoic throughout this. He showed a lot of emotion, actually.
Oh, that's so interesting because over the last few weeks, his wife's done a lot of media, and you even talk about the shift in his posture or his facial
Mhm.
expressions when he talks about Meghan. But
Mhm.
in his wife's media, she's saying things like, "We're still in our honeymoon phase. I'm the happiest I've ever been." And then you watch Prince Harry's videos and you're like, there is no hiding that that person's not very content right now.
He looked very distressed throughout, particularly when talking about his family. That's what was so interesting about this interview is that what he was talking about through large parts of it were how concerned he is about safety and security and all of these things. But he didn't show any stress when talking about that. It was when he was talking about his family or talking about Meghan or talking about these various things. That's when you saw the emotions come up, when he thought that he was being treated unfairly because he wasn't given the security detail the same way everybody in the royal family typically would have. I don't know how to explain it, but in that issue that he had there, it was the unfairness that got him. It wasn't the idea that he's in danger, at least not from what I could see.
No, I love that. I love that you mentioned this because I wrote down while I was watching your video
Mhm.
that there is a shift in him when he's discussing people that aren't important as me get
Mhm.
security.
Mhm.
Like my initial thought there when you were talking about that shift in his posture, like he's stressing to the audience, do you realize that there are people that are less important than I am, that
Mhm.
get special treatment that I don't get? And I'm wondering, is this all, and you might not know this, but I'm asking for your instinct.
Sure.
Is he trying to convince people I need to sympathize with him? I should be on this guy's side because I cannot for the life of me understand why he did this interview.
And now, respected psychologist Dr. John Garrison is speaking out. What he reveals about Harry's body language, mental state, and Meghan's contrasting behavior will leave you stunned. If you care about the truth behind the headlines, hit subscribe.
I think so. That's what I at times when I talked about he would smile, it was to mask a lot. It's in other words to charm people. I think whether or not it came across that way, I think that was the attempt at least. And so I do think that when he would talk about these things, he would assume, and maybe he doesn't have a great perspective on some of these things, but he would assume, of course, if I say this, people are going to see my perspective, they're going to side with me. He may be a little bit lost in there. He may not fully understand how people are going to take some of what he said, but I think that he assumed that if I get this message out there, people are going to agree with me. They're going to see why would I be treated this way? It's everybody else's fault that I'm being treated like this.
What a bubble to live in, because I could understand it if he, this is me getting my royal commentator hat on. I apologize. I could understand it if he had spent the last 5 years working for charities
Mhm.
and had some tangible things he could tell us about. For the last 5 years, I did this in Africa, or I
Mhm.
did, but it's for the last 5 years, I sold a book about my family's secrets, and I have been kicked off. Basically, I had to step down from a charity board because the CEO says that I was causing problems or something, something to that effect. I've done multiple reality shows, multiple podcasts. There has been a real lack of contribution to
Mhm.
this life of 35 years, life of service that he tells us about
Mhm.
in the interview. Which also, like, he's 40 years old, dude. Like,
Yeah.
35 is
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
exactly were you doing at 5 years
Right.
old?
Yeah.
Um, but it's like I just don't think he lives in the same world that we do. I think that he really believes himself.
Well, something that I think may lend itself to that is, and this is just my perspective, just my opinion, but Meghan Markle doesn't seem to be very authentic. I think there's probably a lot of people that can agree with that statement. And, when you're with somebody who doesn't come across as authentic, at least out in the public eye, I've never seen her seeming particularly authentic. And I think that when you're around that, you become a little bit of that as well. He comes across very differently than she does. But as you were referring to, that she's talking about, we're still in our honeymoon phase and whatever, she does have this air of inauthenticity. And I think if that's who you're around 90% of your day, that affects you, I think.
That is such a good point. All right. So I love when you talk about the look of disgust when he says he can forgive the press, because
Mhm.
he's mentioning everyone. I can forgive my father. I can forgive my brother. I can forgive my stepmother. And
Yeah.
he's like, I can even forgive the press. But there's like a legitimate change on
Yeah.
his face when he says, and it's also ironic because he's talking to the press
Yeah.
while he
It is.
says this.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts when you saw that?
It's such a specific look. It couldn't be anything other than disgust. And him saying that goes back to the performance idea. I guess he thought, I should say this. This is something maybe that will go over well, but he couldn't hold it in because you wrinkle your nose, your mouth goes down. It's If you see something disgusting, your face automatically does that. There's several expressions that our face just does, like when we're shocked, like our eyes open, our mouth opens. When we have fear, our corners of our mouth goes down. Disgust is a very distinct look, and he clearly was very disgusted when he was talking about the idea of forgiving the press.
Let's unpack the royal cry for help no one is talking about. It was supposed to be a glamorous night out, Meghan beaming ear to ear, posing effortlessly. But next to her stood Harry.
That is wild. Can I ask you about the performative smile you say that you see when he talks about being married to Meghan? I'm wondering if that performative, because when I was listening to you discuss it, I thought,
Mhm.
is this performative smile because he knows that the royal family doesn't like her, or he knows the press doesn't like her? What is the performative smile about there?
I would think it's the population at large that he's talking to at this point.
Mm,
That's what I think. That's what the purpose of this interview was. Is that it was to garner maybe sympathy, or for have people to charm people into seeing things his way. So I do think it was interesting. If you watch, he'll go from smiling, doing this big smile, to immediately talking about something else, and it goes away immediately. So it's not a very authentic feeling, but he wants people to see that he thinks something. I'm trying to remember specifically what he said, but there was something that I think he wanted to come across, that people were being frivolous about something, or that it wasn't that important. So he smiles when he's talking about it. So I do think it was an effort, because, well, let me explain it this way. When we see people smile that we like, we tend to smile back. So
yeah.
it's not unusual at all that we do that in order to charm people, in order to get them to agree with us, to feel a certain way. So I think that there were certain parts that he definitely wanted to say. He went in there saying, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this. So I think at times he would do that. Or when I talk about Meghan, I'm going to do this because I want people to have this impression. So it's impression management, in my
Mm.
opinion.
Oh, how interesting. Does it say anything to you at all that he promised the BBC 10 minutes? These two are typically very
Mhm.
controlling of the press,
Mhm.
yet he gave them 30 minutes. Does that say to you that he wanted to reiterate so much what he had to say? Because he does repeat himself a couple of times about security. At the end of the day, this is just about security. Does it say, this has really been building up inside him? That's why he sat there for 30 minutes and unleashed. Does that give you any sort of idea of what's going on inside?
So my impression was that security felt like a safe thing to talk about, because
Mm,
it's somehow it's less uh, emotionally charged maybe, or it's a different subject than talking specifically about his family in another context. So I think that there's probably a lot that he wants to say, so he was taking that time to say it. He was doing it through the guise about the security. I don't think that's really what a lot of it was about. And on top of that, he seemed a bit overwhelmed and disorganized throughout this, so he may have lost track of time. He really seemed, and I haven't seen every interview he's ever done, but he seemed more disjointed in this than I think he typically is.
Yeah, because there is a moment where he says, "My wife and I," and then he glitches. And
Hmm.
I don't know if right there he's stopping because he goes, "I don't know if she wants me to say this, so I better not say it." I totally agree with you when you talk about the disjointedness and
Hmm.
how sometimes it's over here and oh nope, he gets it right back on this route. That's so interesting because you would imagine in such a big moment like this, because historians are saying this is going to go in the history books, this
Hmm.
interview,
Hmm.
as potentially what was the nail in the coffin for his relationship with the British royal family.
Sure.
So you think he would want it to be more structured. And when you say security is really the blanket, the safe
Hmm.
space,
Hmm.
are you saying that this was also a way for him to say, I want reconciliation with my, like maybe he wanted to bring up the royal family too?
I think he was what I took away from it. It sounded like he was blaming the royal family pretty directly
Yes,
at times. So,
thank you.
yeah, I think that's what he wants people to hear is like there's space here, but it's not my fault. It's
Yeah.
if I recall uh, correctly, he said something. He basically blamed King Charles specifically for saying that he could fix this, but he isn't doing it. That's a
Mhm.
paraphrase of what he said, but he was very direct about the fact that he's essentially blaming his family. So I think that saying it's their fault that these security issues are here, I think that's really a way to say that it's their fault that things are as broken as they are, or something like that. I don't
And
think
so
he's accepting
why say the
responsibility.
reconciliation thing to save yourself so you don't look like a jerk? Why do you say that then? Because that was the I don't know if you noticed this,
Hmm.
but from the American media
Yeah.
standpoint, that was the big everything. Every interview I did after that was Harry wants a reconciliation, and I'm like, I actually don't think he does.
Yeah.
Looking distant, drained, and disconnected. Facial tension, blank stares, nervous tics. According to Dr. John Garrison, a specialist in trauma and nonverbal behavior, these are not just random expressions, they're red flags. Dr. Garrison didn't hold back. In his professional breakdown, he stated, Prince Harry exhibits classic signs of unresolved grief, emotional suppression, and submissive body posture.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to know what conversations he's been having maybe at home or elsewhere that are saying like, they need to come to you. You don't need to reconcile with them. It's their fault that all this is happening. Like, you don't have any responsibility here. Things like that. So yeah, it didn't seem conciliatory at all to me. It seemed uh I was surprisingly direct at how angry he seemed at his family actually. So,
I'm really glad you brought that up. Okay, so I want to. I don't know how much you know about the security issue, but
mhm.
having watched that interview, I feel like a lot of people that aren't necessarily heavily invested
Yeah.
feel like Prince Harry has lost his security. But the reality is, Prince Harry just has to give Ravik the
Yeah.
council that
Hmm.
determines his security 28 days notice, and 9 out of 10 times I've seen that he does get the full on armed
Sure.
guards, police
Yeah.
protection.
Yeah.
And it is based on what he's coming to the UK for. So if he's doing something frivolous, like coming to go shooting with his friends, or
Yeah.
Megan wants to go Christmas shopping, I highly doubt they're going to get the full, the
Sure.
all the bells and whistles. But
Yeah.
if he is coming to represent a charity that's associated with the British royal family, or if he's coming to represent the king in any way or to support the king, I
Mhm.
understand that he gets it. Did you feel like the way that he tells the story is that he's been abandoned?
That's the if you're not familiar with that background, you watch that interview, that's what it's going to sound like. That's what it sounded like to me because I didn't know all the ins and outs. I've been corrected on some of them since then. So I'm finding out a lot more about the specifics about that. But the way that this comes across is yeah, like I have no security. Like they're doing nothing for me. Not I have to let them know I have to plan a month ahead of time to get full security. So yeah, it's interesting how he framed it. So for anybody who's uninitiated in that way, they're going to come away thinking that he's been abandoned by the royal family and they're refusing to provide him any security. At least that's what it sounded like to me when I watched it.
Right. And so Scott stopped short, Scott Rouse, our mutual
Hmm.
friend, in my interview with him, he stopped short of saying something psychological is going on. He told me that you were the expert. What is your observation on his state of mind? And our audience knows you're not
Yeah,
working with him directly, but
right.
when you watch that, were there any concerns?
So yeah, so these are just my opinions about what's going on. But he, as I said, he seemed very disjointed when they would talk about certain things. He would and ah a whole lot for somebody who's in the public eye, who's able to speak well or typically able to speak well. It was unusual to see that many ums and ahs, blinking constantly, seeming to lose his train of thought, pausing at times to have to look down and think. To me, I'm not. This is obviously I'm not diagnosing him with anything, but he did act like somebody that's dealing with trauma. Actually, that's what I see a lot when I'm with somebody in therapy. We can be talking about relatively normal things. Then when we go back to talking about something that's adjacent to or about something traumatic, that's what it starts to look like when they start talking about things that are deeply hard for them, that are deeply challenging. So I did see somebody who looked like they were really struggling, who, and I believe, if I understand right, he has a history of anxiety, so it's not maybe entirely shocking. Um,
Yeah.
but given his history, that it would make a lot of sense. But I did see somebody who looked like they were very, very much struggling in that realm.
especially when standing near Megan. He points to repeated moments where Harry glances to Megan before answering questions, suggesting deep-seated anxiety and fear of misstepping. This is someone who feels trapped, unheard, and emotionally isolated, yet smiling for the cameras. The contrast between Harry's pain and Megan's polished composure is, in Garrison's words, psychologically disturbing. Prince Harry has said he's on a journey of healing, but Dr. Garrison warns healing requires truth, autonomy, and emotional safety. Right now, Harry may have none of those. As Megan smiles for the spotlight, the man behind her may be falling apart, and the world is finally noticing. Should Prince Harry seek help independently? Should someone in the royal family intervene? Like this video if you believe in mental health awareness. Comment your thoughts below, and make sure to subscribe, because this isn't the end of the story. Until next time, take care of your mind. Even a prince can break.